get this set up. And good morning, and thank you to everyone for inviting architects and engineers to present the results of significant research going into the cause of collapse of the third high-rise building on September 11th of 2001, a 47-story steel frame building not hit by a plane. Several members of our 911Truth team are also with us this morning. President and founder, Richard Gage. Good morning, Richard. Okay, and also Roland Engel, who is a board member and leads our project due diligence team. And Roland's name is there, but he's invisible. And Dr. Leroy Halsey from the University of Alaska, who led the study that was a 4-year project that was conducted on investigating Building 7. And Zaida Orr, who is a member of our project due diligence team. And I think that's it as far as I know, is members from architects and engineers being present this morning. So we are just a few of over 3,300 vetted architects, engineers, scientists, and demolition experts who are involved in and or endorse the work of AE911Truth. It's my pleasure to revisit Mississippi, even if only virtually. In 1971, after attaining a master's degree in structural engineering from the University of Illinois and becoming a registered structural engineer, my employer sent me, along with my wife and son, to Jackson to be the resident engineer on construction of the wastewater treatment plant south of Jackson. The events of 9/11 had a devastating and long-standing impact on the United States and the world. We in the engineering community have a uniquely responsible role to play in determining what really caused the World Trade Center buildings to collapse on 9/11. This information is so important for the public, policymakers, and those responsible for the public's safety to be aware of. I became aware in 2013 after having a brief discussion with a representative of architects and engineers and watching a video of Building 7 as it collapsed, that the commonly expounded explanation for the cause of collapse of the Twin Towers and Building 7 was seriously flawed. As we go through the presentation this morning, you will see that the official explanation of the cause of collapse of Building 7 ignores significant scientific evidence and is incompatible with the laws of physics and thereby fatally flawed. If any questions or comments come up as we go through the presentation, please make notes, including the slide numbers if appropriate, and hold them until we get to Q&A so we can keep on track time-wise. One quick question I have is if there's a way we can do this, maybe on the reaction spot, if we can do a poll here and find out how many of you were aware before seeing the schedule for this conference that there was a third high-rise building that totally collapsed on 9/11. Can we, maybe Harry can, or just a, well, okay, a thumbs up will do it too. Okay, all right. And,
Melinda, can you take a show of hands on the participants queue?
Okay. Yeah, not seeing a lot.
I do see a few.
Just a few.
Yeah,
okay.
Everybody's got their camera off. We forgot to talk to Melinda about that earlier. Anyway.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, maybe we can ask that question again at the end, just to be interesting to find out. Okay, so if you look behind me, just over my head, Look closely, you see a penthouse on the top of building 7. That's in the background behind me there. And the one on the left side, which is the east end of the roof, houses some HVAC equipment. And there is more HVAC equipment in the to the right or toward the west end. We'll be paying particular attention to the building failure pattern associated with the loads from this equipment. So let's roll through the slides now. Okay, all right, here we go. Okay. According to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the governmental agency responsible for investigating the cause of collapse, it was primarily due to normal office fires. NIST is generally recognized as being a reliable governmental agency. However, as you will see, we are critical of NIST's handling of the 9/11 investigation. Listen to NIST spokesperson Shyam Sunder's unqualified statement.
What we found was that uncontrolled building fires caused an extraordinary event. The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fire.
Architects and engineers had done enough research to recognize that fires alone did not explain the cause of collapse of Building 7. To delve more deeply into what caused Building 7 to collapse, architects and engineers funded a 4-year study led by Dr. Leroy Halsey. So what's the problem? Prior to 9/11, no other steel frame high-rise buildings had totally collapsed due to fire. Therefore, it is essential that the failure mechanism for this building be understood. Subsequently, the UAF agreed to re-examine what caused Building 7 to collapse. The objective of the UAF study was to, 1, examine the structural response to fire loads, 2, rule out scenarios that could not cause collapse, and 3, identify types of failures and their locations that could have caused the observed collapse. The UAF study used the same material properties that NIST used. The methodology included 3 approaches. 1, simulate the structural response to the fire loading. 2, examine previously developed collapse hypotheses. And 3, simulate scenarios that are consistent with the building collapse as observed. They studied reports previously issued by FEMA, NIST, and 2 private parties. Well, how, where, and to what extent did Building 7, shown in brown on the next slide coming up, okay, located about 350 feet from World Trade Center number 1, get damaged? Building 7 was built through and over the existing 2-story tall Con Edison substation. The plan view on the left shows the trapezoidal crosshatched footprint of Building 7 and the Con Edison substation footprint in turquoise. Rotate the plan view 180 degrees to relate it to the top of the substation in the picture. The Building 7 columns were supported through the substation. There was 82 columns, 58 on the perimeter, and 24 in the central core. The most northeasterly column in the central core, number 79, was the most heavily loaded column by virtue of the floor area it supported, and because much of the load from the east penthouse was supported by column 79. A looking west picture taken during construction is shown next. Column 79 is just out of view on the left. The girder that frames into column 79 runs across this picture. NIST claims that the girder on this line, on floor 13, was forced off its bearing pad at column 79. We'll take a closer look at these details shortly. A picture of the southwest corner during construction. Building 7 on the left was not hit by a plane, but 7 hours after the Twin Towers came down, it collapsed into a 5-story pile of rubble within a few seconds. Here's a video that starts after the east penthouse had already fallen below the roof level. Listen closely to how the reporters described what they were seeing and hearing.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Did they actually use the word brought down, and who was it that was telling you this?
The fire department, and they did use the word, we're going to have to bring it down.
We heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. It looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out. About a second later, the bottom floor caved out. The building followed after that, and we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground.
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. It looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
Okay, again, Building 7 was 350 feet away from Tower 1. Buildings 3, 4, 5, and 6 were subjected to much heavier debris fallout from the towers than was Building 7, seen near the top, all of which suffered extensive damage. However, none of them totally collapsed like Building 7 did. According to NIST, most of the debris damage occurred near the lower west end of the south face of Building 7, but they claim that a progressive collapse was initiated with the collapse of Column 7, located in the diagonally opposite area of the building. Early speculations that the fires were fed by diesel fuel were ruled out by NIST. Fires were observed in or near the south half of the east wall and the east half of the north wall. The hottest temperatures occurred along the east wall and the east end of the south wall, areas diagonally opposite from column 79. Fires were observed on the two sides of Building 7 that were shielded from tower debris on floors located primarily between the 7th floor and the mid-height of the building. This is the north wall. Floor numbers are shown up the left side and the column numbers across the top. This photo, taken 90 minutes before the collapse, shows that the fire on floor 12 has already progressed far from the northeast corner of the building. The NIST collapse theory, in summary, is that the floor beams in the northeast corner of floor 13 pushed the interior supporting girder off its supporting bearing pad on column 79, precipitating a progressive collapse of the entire building. But was it possible for the girder to be pushed off its bearing pad? NIST initially claimed that the bearing pad was 11 inches wide, and once the girder had been pushed laterally 5.5 inches, it was no longer supported. However, the shop drawing showed a 12-inch wide bearing seat, which NIST later admitted to. A progressive failure starting at column 79 was the key to NIST's explanation of the cause of collapse. The UAF study therefore examined the related conditions in depth. The girder movement relative to its bearing seat at column 79 was examined using two different programs in various boundary conditions. Here's their abacus model of the 12th and 13th floors. NIST worst case 13th floor temperatures were used in the UAF model. Floor 13's displacement was calculated using the SAP 2000 program and NIST's temperature conditions. The eastward movement is greatest along the east edge of the floor, the area shown in blue. However, NIST based its analysis on the assumption that the east end of the floor beams did not move. Hence, their calculations showed 6.25 inches of floor beam displacement at the girder. The SAP analysis, recognizing a more realistic structural movement, calculates a differential movement between column 79 and the girder of less than 1 inch. Using the abacus program with shear studs connecting the floor beam, the floor slab to the beams and girder, the UAF study calculated a girder displacement relative to the column of less than 1 inch. Using the NIST boundary conditions, abacus calculated a westward displacement of 5.11 inches, more than an inch less than the 6 inches needed to push the web of the girder past its 12-inch seat at the column. Approach 2, evaluation of NIST collapse initiation theory. Note that the side plates in column 79 protrude 1.8 inches past each side of the flange face to which the bearing seats were attached. Regardless of how far west the floor beams might have theoretically pushed the girder, the column side plates would have prevented the girder from moving off the bearing seat. NIST depiction of the bearing details shown in the upper left did not include the web stiffeners and underrepresented the extent of the side plate protrusion compared to the shop drawing details shown on the floor right. The existence of the web stiffeners is confirmed by this construction photo. This is a graphic depiction of the web stiffeners omitted from the NIST report figure and model. This is NIST's depiction of the girder column connection details and is absent the web stiffeners. After being confronted with the oversight, NIST Public Affairs Office issued an irrelevant explanation of why they left the stiffeners out of their depictions. Even if the girder web moved beyond the edge of the bearing seat, the stiffened girder flange would not have failed. But let's take a look at what might have happened if somehow the girder connection to the column did fail and the 13th floor fell to the 12th floor. The support plate connection at floor 12 had a capacity of 632 kips. According to NIST, the shear connectors did not keep the floor slab connected to the steel framework during the collapse, so just the weight of the beams and girders was used in calculating the impact load on floor 12. The combined stiffness of both the falling framework and floor 12 girder was calculated. The resulting impact on the 12th floor is 62 kips. less than 10% of the 632 kip capacity of the 12th floor girder support plate. Thus, the 12th floor would not fall and the cascade would not happen. Moving on to approach 3, simulation of global collapse. In this video of building 7 collapsing, note that the east penthouse on the left side of the picture starts coming down first, followed by the rest of the HVAC equipment in the center and the west end of the roof, followed by the symmetrical collapse of the building perimeter. Okay, now let's compare the NIST program model with a video of the actual collapse. Compare the deformations in their model against the lack of any significant deformations in the video of the collapsing building. Also note that NIST program model stops well before the collapse is complete. Okay, here are 2 more views of this model of the collapse, which do not come close to resembling the observed behavior. Now let's compare the NIST program model with a video of the actual collapse. Compare the deformations in their model against the lack of any significant deformations in the video of the collapsing building. Let's see, okay. Okay. All right. Okay. What do we got here? 50 feet. Oh, we're down to 50 feet. Okay. Okay. So what would cause the east penthouse to collapse in the manner it did? As shown on the left, if columns 79, 80, and 81 are removed from floors 6 to 13, the penthouse does not collapse. On the right, if the same columns are removed from floors 45 to the east penthouse, it does collapse. Let's look at the NIST column failure scenario. If only the 3 eastern core columns, circled in green, are removed, the building does not collapse. If the next 3 core columns, 76, 7, and 8 are removed, then go to the next slide, and we'll see the exterior columns become overloaded, but not the next row of core columns. Failure of the 10 exterior columns does not lead to overall failure. A dynamic analysis leads to a similar failure scenario. Okay. The UAF global collapse analysis, based on simultaneous failure of all the core columns, followed 1.3 seconds later by the simultaneous failure of all exterior columns, produces the behavior observed in videos of the collapse. East penthouse, rest of the HVAC, and the building coming down. Here it is again, looking at the north face, east penthouse, the rest of the HVAC equipment, and then the building coming down uniformly. NIST model of the collapse, which did not include any structural damage caused by debris impacting the south face, shows considerable deformation not seen in the videos. In 2008, David Chandler, a physics teacher, proved that the roof line was in free fall for 2.5 seconds, which NIST was forced to admit, but they did not address the implications of free fall. Here's his graph and his comments follow.
Just by watching it, anybody can see that Building 7 fell close to free fall. To measure it, I used software to track the corner of the building and compute a graph of downward velocity as a function of time. The graph had a long, straight section indicating constant acceleration. Measuring the slope, I found the acceleration to be within 1% of the acceleration of gravity for the first 2.5 seconds. In other words, the building fell through its own structure with zero resistance.
So how much resistance do columns provide once they start buckling? A lot, up to 25%, even as they completely buckle. What's the significance of free fall acceleration? The NIST model never accelerates at free fall and thus cannot explain this free fall episode in the collapse. What are the conclusions of the UAF global collapse analysis? 1, columns 79, 80, and 81 did not fail at the lower floors of the building. 2, the hypothetical failure of 3 easternmost core columns would not trigger a horizontal collapse of core column failures, thereby invalidating the hypotheses of the earlier public and private reports. 3, even if we assume that failure of the 3 easternmost core columns could lead to failure of the next row of core columns, the building would tip southeastward and not fall straight down. 4, the simultaneous failure of all core columns over 8 stories, followed 1.3 seconds later by the simultaneous failure of all exterior columns over the same 8 stories, produces almost exactly the behavior observed in videos of the collapse. 5, the collapse of Building 7 was a global failure, not a progressive collapse involving a sequential failure of columns throughout the building. 6, the UAF team was unable to identify any progressive sequence of failures that could have taken place and caused a total collapse of the building. This brings us to ethics, safety, competence, truthfulness, faithfulness, merit, and professional honor. When decisions are made after the fact in order to cover up ethical violations, errors, or omissions, these decisions become additional ethical violations. So, time for another poll. After seeing this, who agrees that the official reports are so seriously flawed that a new independent investigation is called for? Can we do a hands up or whatever, or wave, or have you become convinced? Okay, I see some thumbs up. A lot of people are indicating that, yeah, all right, they've seen enough to be convinced that a new report is warranted, a new independent investigation. Okay. Well, I realize there was a lot of information there, so I'll give you time to digest it. Okay, if you wish to learn more about the UAF report, there's the link to the website you can go to. If you want to learn more from a lot more of the work that we're doing at Architects and Engineers, there's the link to our website. If you want to contact me directly, perhaps I can either answer any questions or see that the question or comment gets to the appropriate person in architects and engineers. I guess with that, why we have several minutes here. Let's see, what time is it? We have several minutes for some discussion, Q&A.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions or anything, please, enter them in the chat or hit your raise hand, and either myself or Melinda, if you do the raise hand, we'll acknowledge you, and then you could unmute yourself to verbally ask your question. Or again, like I said, if you would like to type your question in, we'll monitor the chat and ask those questions as they come in.
I'm seeing a lot of yeses regarding the call for a new investigation. Okay.
All right, we got one comment here from Randy Beatty. He says, the media video you showed mentioned that the New York Fire Department said the building needed to be brought down. Did they later recant that statement, or was this investigated further?
That's a great question. I'll take that one, Larry.
Yes, okay, good enough.
The fire department was told that somebody might want to go on mute. Everybody who's not speaking probably because we're getting feedback. That there was structural damage. There was an anonymous engineer that Chief Nigro, fire department in New York, said he was asked how long the building would last, because it had a few small scattered fires burning in it. And I guess they were expecting it to come down. Clearly, there was all kinds of expectations on the part of the fire department that the building had structural damage and was going to come down. So they asked this engineer, who we can't get the name of, how long would it have? And he said, well, in its current state, you have about 5 hours. And sure enough, in 5 hours, the building came down after the witnesses of explosions, which you heard just a couple of, we heard their testimony earlier. So it's a pretty extraordinary story. And now, mind you, this is the unprecedented collapse of a high-rise building. Never have we lost a steel frame fireproofed skyscraper ever in the history of thousands of skyscrapers around the world. And so for the first time here, this engineer has successfully predicted that this one would come down in 5 hours. Indeed, there are lots of other witnesses that we have on our other videos and information that heard explosions and so forth. So the implications of this unprecedented collapse and in the manner that it did, such as the old hotels in Las Vegas, for instance, which of course, which is the only manner in which a high-rise building has ever come down due to fire. It's just uncanny. You can see why there's 3,400 architects and engineers signed on to our petition at AE911Truth.org demanding a new investigation. So we encourage each and every one of you to visit the website to learn more, as Larry mentioned, but also to sign that petition, which is up there on the website. publicly demanding, really, a new investigation based on not just the evidence that you're seeing here for World Trade Center 7, but indeed there's implications, as you can imagine, for the destruction of all 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers on 9/11 that need to be reinvestigated.
Let's see here. We got a comment here. Might just be more kind of an extension, I think, of what you explained here. It's asking what was the cause of Building 7 failure, and I'm guessing technically in regards with, I guess, what you kind of identified. And I mean, is there some, I guess, items in some of the, I guess, investigations thus far that can point to additional causes of the Building 7 to fail, the failure of Building 7?
Leroy, do you want to come off mute and take that one?
That would be, yes, beautiful. Well, while we're waiting for Leroy to come off, well, there he is. Okay.
So I guess what I would like to offer is that we intentionally did not go down a path of saying, here is the cause. What we did do in our research is say, here are the elements that were needed for this thing to occur. And so we identified what columns had to come out and the sequence by which they happened. And then we wanted to eliminate any potential politics. It was all about science. And so we start off by saying, number one, this is what we'll identify what didn't happen, and we'll identify what transpired on that day in terms of what happened during it coming down. I did not go to the point of saying what produced those columns to lose the ability to carry load. And I won't today either.
I guess we can ask people to use their imagination, their knowledge, what could possibly have caused such a uniform collapse, and figure that out for yourself.
All right, let's see here. Another question from Mike Sullivan. It has in regards with, did you work with any government agencies in some of your, I guess, research and comment on what your working relationship was with any of those particular government agencies? I'm guessing from state or national, local.
So I guess either Richard or Roland could respond to that, I'm sure.
Leroy started in. Go ahead, Leroy.
We number one did not have any relationship with any governmental agency. We very carefully did not try to read anything about what was going on from various sides of the page. We wanted to let science drive us everywhere. So I was very, very careful about not allowing our students to be participating in any kind of conversations with any governmental agencies, with any groups out there. I met every day with these students. I wanted to make sure that we were clear about what we were doing in terms of pure science, and pure science led us where we came out. So I had no idea when we went into this game over the last couple of years that we were doing work that it was going to be a global collapse. Everybody was saying it was progressive. I ended up discovering through the science process that it was global, and that's why you see that word. It was clearly a global collapse, and nobody, I guess, has argued about that point. When you look at the videos, it's clear that's truly what happened. I hope I've answered your question.
Let's see here. We got a question here. Are buildings typically designed to collapse inside themselves during a catastrophic event, maybe similar to this and such? And I guess it's more kind of dealing in regards with the design of the actual building. Are those, is that a consideration?
Richard is probably the best guy to answer that one.
That's a structural question. Let's go to Leroy. Are buildings designed to collapse? I just wanted to let Roland know that his camera is on. If he didn't want it on, he's going to have to turn it off.
So, so number one, we design these buildings to meet code. And those codes are very clear about what to load, how to load it, what the conditions are for the area that we're in. I mean, so a building design, for example, in San Francisco would be a different design than you might have in New York because of the conditions of those areas, seismically, wind, hurricanes, for example, any number of possibilities. All of those things are in consideration. And we have, we currently in our new codes allow for return periods. So basically these, the wind is designed, I believe at this point in time, for a 700-year return period as seismic. So those things we design for. We have not previously, for the most part, ever designed a building to collapse. But what we are doing today, in many cases, particularly for military installations and so forth, we're starting to have to design for blast loading or terrorism issues. And my view is down the road, we're going to publicly see that all buildings that involve public usage, such as schools, areas where people go into that are dealing with state and federal public usage, probably will have to be designed for terrorism and blast loading. But prior to several recent years, prior to that, we didn't have those issues to worry about. I hope that helped.
We got another question from Randy Beatty that's asking, who worked on Building 7? I'm guessing in regards with, who engineered or architected the building and construction of the actual building. And I suppose probably, during some, or have they actually been consulted?
Go ahead, Leroy.
Let me answer that question too. So I really, really wanted to be able to talk to the structural engineer. I really wanted to talk to the contractor. I really wanted to talk to the material suppliers. But that stuff was not available. Locked up in the court records.
And the engineer of record was Irwin Cantor. He had designed several high-rise buildings in the Manhattan area. The architect of record was Emery Roth and Sons.
No, actually, I wanted to know who worked in Building 7. Who were the tenants?
Oh, this is a financial building. More than half of the building was composed of high-end financial firms like Solomon Brothers. Actually had dozens of floors. But also in this building, we had the IRS, the CIA's largest headquarters outside of Langley, the Department of, I'm spacing on some of these. The Zaida, you can help me with these tenants if you remember. It's really quite extraordinary. The Department of Defense had offices in there as well. The emergency bunker was on the 23rd floor, is designed to handle an emergency such as this citywide, but apparently it wasn't used for this purpose. The building was evacuated after the planes hit the towers, but before the towers came down. So they decided to evacuate for some reason. Hope that helps.
By the way, Rudy Giuliani had an office in that building as well.
And I think that was the one we're referring to, the Emergency Operations Center.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We have a comment here from Western Police asking any explanations where the BBC reporter was discussing and saying that Building 7 had collapsed, but during that video, it was still shown as standing during that live, I guess, session on there, and I suppose collapsed afterwards. He made
This
that.
is true. Thanks, Harry. The collapse of this building was announced 20 minutes before it happened on the BBC, and this is in video. And true enough, the building is standing behind the broadcaster, and they even announced the reason for the collapse of this building, and later they apologized for this confusing this error, citing the confusing events of the day. Going, well, wait a minute, are you guys psychic or what? I mean, what's going on here? And there's a number of evidence of the phenomena of foreknowledge of this building's collapse. We have mysterious construction workers, for instance, walking away from Building 7, hearing an explosion over their shoulder, looking back. We got background noise. If somebody could go on mute. Papers shuffling. Thanks. And so we look back. He looks back over his shoulder at Building 7, and then he looks straight into the CNN camera and says, "Do you hear that? That building's coming down. The building's going to blow up. Flame and debris coming down." And our longer videos of this building's collapse, you hear this. For instance, there's a new movie we made all about Leroy and the study. If you want further information, I highly encourage everybody to go to Amazon Prime and look up Seven, S-E-V-E-N. That film, that documentary is 45 minutes long, and it's an extraordinary examination of the effort that the University of Alaska made with Leroy and his team of PhD candidates about this building. There's also a more in-depth analysis called 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out. That's free on YouTube. Experts Speak Out as a search on YouTube will bring up that video. Or 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out these days. You might have to put the whole thing in. So hope that helps.
All right, I think we have time probably just for one more, maybe quick question here. I think Don Hendon actually asked, do you know if there were any benefits to any people or organization as a result of this collapse, and maybe in regards with maybe some of the tenants, perhaps? Has anything like that been identified?
Well, we do know that Larry Silverstein was the developer of Building 7. He acquired the other 6 buildings of the World Trade Center in a deal that finished just 6 weeks prior to 9/11, casting an interesting shadow on the overall complexity of this set of events. Building 7 was speculated to have been an operation center. That's all we know. We know Larry Silverstein did say, interestingly enough, a year after 9/11, he said, talking to the fire commander, maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And so we did pull the building, and we watched it come down. Something very similar to that. They gave the order, is what he said, and we watched the building come down. Well, firemen is who he's talking about, and firemen don't pull buildings. Pull is a term used in the controlled demolition industry. So he came back later and said, "Oh, I didn't mean pull the building. I meant pull the firemen out of the building." Well, the firemen were not in the building. They were told not to fight the fire. They were told that it had structural damage, and so they never went in to fight those fires, those few small scattered fires in that building. And later, of course, NIST disavowed any significant factor in the building's collapse by that structural damage. So we have a whole lot of inconsistencies across the board that don't add up in the official narrative of this building's collapse.
So Richard, if I could make a comment, I would like the people that have listened here today to just think about this going away. Almost all of the floors in this building were financial related, or secret information that needed to be kept, so that there would not be any chance of papers laying around. So if you really stop and think about it, financial records would have to be probably locked up daily. So consider the fact, where's the fire combustibles coming from? So you wouldn't expect a very big fire in this kind of a complex.
Good point. And the Securities and Exchange Commission occupied the 12th and 13th floors, which interestingly had the most serious fires in them, i.e. the area of great interest by NIST in trying to establish a narrative of how this building collapsed at those floors. Well, the SEC lost thousands of files related to hundreds of extremely high-profile cases like Enron and WorldCom. So regarding the question about motivation, there's some possible fodder for fuel for that fire. But we don't go there either. We do try to stick with the science, but we're not unaware of these controversial issues that remain as a thorn in the flesh of the official narrative.
All right.
And I guess along those, I might just add that looking at the bigger picture too, just think about what 9/11 did to the political environment in this country and what kind of events, world events, happened subsequently, and probe into an understanding of possible relationships. That's a whole different study. That's something that we are not directly involved in, but it does suggest that there are some pretty large agendas that could have been at play, but that's a whole different ball game to get into.
Well, looks like we pretty much have run our time here on it. So I want to thank you, Larry and Leroy and Richard, for taking the time to talk and comment and answer these questions. Melinda, do we have a winner for the door prize?
Yes, we do. First, we'd like to thank Wagner for sponsoring this $100 Bass Pro gift card, and our winner is Wilson Ruff. Congratulations, Wilson.
Congratulations.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. We very much appreciate having this opportunity and look forward to continuing our relationship with the society. And if there's any further information we can provide, why, be happy to do that. So thank you very much.